We are live.
Welcome to the regular session, Police Accountability Board, Wednesday, April 9th, 2025. Public notice to access the meeting remotely. Join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using this URL in the packet. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on Rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 891-7458-9069. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. Land acknowledgement. The city of Berkeley recognizes that the community we live in was built on the territory of the Huchun, the ancestral unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Bruno Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to all of the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Bruno Band. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of a vibrant community at the West Berkeley Shellman, and the Ohlone people who continue to reside in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land since the city of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the city of Berkeley, it is not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. With that, we'll go to agenda item 1, roll call to order and roll call.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, this meeting was called to order at 6:32 p.m. I'll now proceed with roll call. Chair Cayetano.
Here.
Vice Chair Wilson is currently absent. Board Member Calavita.
Here.
Board Member Lethbridge.
Here.
Board Member Wells.
Here.
And Board Member Williams is on extended leave of absence. On behalf of the ODPA, we have Director Aguilar, Data Analyst Nandini, Administrative Analyst Busan, and myself, Policy Analyst Vicente. On behalf of the Berkeley Police Department tonight, we have Chief Lewis joining us remotely and Lieutenant Bonnet who are joining us here in person. And I don't believe we have staff from the City Manager's office today. And with that, Chair, I conclude the roll call.
Great. Next, agenda item 2, approval of the agenda. I guess one question is, does anyone want to add anything to the agenda? We have a very skinny agenda.
I don't want to add anything, but I have a question. Item 9C says discussion and action on PAB's proposed response to the BPD's 2024 annual report. But then the document on page 30 of the packet is dated April 4th, and it's not dated draft, so I'm just wondering, is this proposed or was this sent? So I'm just not clear.
No, it was not sent. We drafted that based on the conversation. So that was meant to be a draft for your consideration.
Okay. Okay. That's the only question I had. Thanks.
Okay. Anyone else like to make any changes to the agenda? Okay, then I'm going to ask that.
I move that the agenda be approved.
I second.
Are there any objections to that motion? Seeing or hearing none, the agenda is approved.
Okay. Agenda item 3, public comment.
Thank you, Chair. I'm now proceeding with public comment. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but may be allotted less time if there are many speakers. They may comment on any matters in the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. With that said, I'll start with those physically present first, before moving on to our virtual attendees. And I do see one speaker. One moment while I get the timer on the screen. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Kit Stagnor. Thank you all very much for the work you do. I want to mention to you that next Tuesday, the City Council meeting has on their agenda the report that you had put out on the texting scandal, the study that you had done on the texting issues. And I went to the agenda meeting, and they moved this from the action calendar to the consent calendar. They wanted to have it alongside the resolution that, Councilmember Blackaby is bringing. First of all, I'm not happy that it's on consent because it's, consent means you're gonna pass something. But in fact, what that's consenting to is at the very bottom of the item, it says it was sent to city council with a negative recommendation. Now, it's not a sure thing for it to be on consent. And if sufficient number of council members say, please take this off consent and move it to action, it would be moved to action at the meeting. You might want to appeal to the council members who appointed you to have this move to action so that there can be a full discussion of it. At the agenda meeting, it was said, well, we want to allow the TA to talk about this, and surely we can still do that even if it's on consent. But in fact, once the meeting starts and they look at that it's on consent, there are actually rules on consent that nothing can be discussed for any length of time by the people on the dais. And it's not right for it to be on consent, and I really hope that you will help them see that. Because in part because the recommendation that was made by the committee really didn't look at all the parts of that. So there's a number of parts to it that have never been looked at, and I think it's just highly disrespectful for the city council to say, oh, we don't even want to think about this. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional public comment from those physically present? Seeing none, I'll now move on to our virtual attendees. If you're attending on Zoom and would like to provide public comment, please use the raise hand icon or *9 to be recognized. Again, if you'd like to provide public comment, please use the raise hand icon or *9 to be recognized. Sure, at this time, there are no hands raised from our virtual attendees.
Thanks, Jose. Okay, next item, agenda item 4, approval of the minutes. Any changes to the minutes?
I just had a quick question for staff. So I noticed that the minutes have footnotes that direct the reader to different parts of the meeting video on YouTube. And I don't know if I missed it before or if that's new, but it just seemed like a lot of unnecessary work for staff to have to do that. And so I just had a question about that because I don't really think it's necessary.
Sorry, I'm trying to look at what particular.
It's on page 10.
Yeah, sometimes we do that, so I know we had conversations about how, whether it's action minutes or whether it's more summarized minutes. But when there's like very sensitive items, we just want to make sure that there's like full transparency there. As part of our process and doing the minutes, we're just also going back and reviewing, so that's when we just flagged it there. But if you don't think that's necessary, we can go away with it. It's also helpful for us. If we need to go back in the record, we quickly have that available to us.
Okay, so it sounds like it is additional work if you're already right there, just putting it in.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. With that, unless anybody else has any issues, I move that we approve the minutes.
My second.
Are there any objections to the approval of the minutes? Seeing and hearing none, the minutes are approved.
Thank you all. Okay, item 5, ARPA staff report.
Okay. Good evening, Chair, board members, colleagues, members of the public. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're in April now. We wanted to just provide quick updates and then we'll take any questions. So one of the things I've been updating, we've been working with the vice chair, which we haven't provided her the annual report draft. We're not providing her. We're anticipating with next week before it can make it to your hands as a full body. So we just want to make sure we're incorporating all the feedback and streamlining that process of review. So we're working on that. We have noted, we acknowledge that a few times we have received requests to provide a list of the outstanding requests that this body has made to other departments. That is a little bit more time expensive activity, so we want to make sure we get it right. So we were working on that. We anticipate getting to you by next meeting, so we'll have an update on that. We did make a formal request for the specific cases, that you identified in the control equipment report. We've been having internal dialogue with the department. Captain Schofield's particulars of point of contact there. I have provided him some clarification. Again, this is, I believe, the first time that we're doing this for this particular report. There's been some, just clarification sought. The chief is here tonight, so I don't know if she can provide an update for us during her time, but right now it's, there is an active request. We haven't received the record yet. So, let's see, the downtown task force report as noted, will be in the consent. There was on the consent calendar of the April 15th meeting, there was a consideration at the Rules and Agenda Committee about whether she be considered action, but it was decided to include it in consent. And just for, I guess, just general education, historical awareness, I was getting more acquainted with the process, but at one point, the procedure was such that if a report went to a policy committee, if it received anything other than a positive recommendation, it would go straight to action. But the procedures were changed in that now the rules and agenda committee get to decide whether it's action and consent. So that happened in the last few years, that changed. So that's why if we submitted at a different point in time, it would have went to action. But because it received a negative recommendation.
And remind me, who's on the rules and agenda committee?
The mayor, Councilmember Humbert, and Councilmember Tappan.
Blackberry.
Blackberry? Okay. Yeah. Okay. And, the other items, police accountability, they have been submitted, to the body. It's on the consent agenda, and the recognition for the former board members as well. It'll be there. There's also, an appointment, for a new board member, at that council meeting as well. So, I do have an active request to find out the status, of finding a temporary replacement for board member Williams while he's out of leave. And I'll have an update to you as soon as possible, certainly by the next meeting. Just wanted to give, quick updates on NACO webinars training. We do, just gentle nudge, this year's conference is gonna be in Minneapolis in October. There, this Friday is the last day to submit a proposal if you have any interest. So definitely encourage you to do so. It's good to, share that stage with our colleagues and our knowledge. But more, before that, we have a few webinars already scheduled for NACO. And these are, I think, very important ones, that might catch your attention. On April 25th is a webinar, Understanding Civilian Oversight's Fast Changing Landscape, Legal Landscape. And that'll be, moderated by Sharon Fairley. She's a professor in practice from the University of Chicago. She was also the head of the Chicago Office of Police Accountability a few years back. There's also another webinar on June 12th. That's titled The New World of Artificial Intelligence, Opportunities for Police Oversight Practitioners. That's a ever-developing conversation about the integration of AI, so that is of interest as well. And then the third one that's listed, it will be on August 6th, and that's hate crimes, explicit bias, and implicit bias, evolution of standards for decertification of police officers in California. And one of our colleagues here locally, John Alden, the Inspector General for the Sonoma County Independent Office of Law Enforcement Review and Outreach is going to be on that panel. So that I think that would be very relevant to the work that we're doing here locally in California. So those are the immediate updates I wanted to provide. Given that there's no members from the city manager's office, I don't know if staff have any updates that I neglected to provide.
No additional updates on.
Can you guys give an update on the outstanding requests?
Yeah, that's what that's, we're gonna get it to you certainly by the next agenda. If we can get it to you earlier than that, we'll get it to you. That, we did that exercise, probably over a year ago, and we just, it took a lot of time because we wanted to make sure that we thoroughly reflected all the active requests. And that's why the minutes also is helpful for us to do it as thorough as we can and timestamp it. So,
No, sorry, I meant the outstanding requests for the records that we requested,
which ones, I'm sorry?
the controlled equipment.
So that's the one that I mentioned, Captain Schofield and I have been having a conversation. I spoke with, acting Captain Montgomery today. He said, he didn't have any further updates, so I'll punt it to, the chief, her report, if she can provide some updates on that.
Any questions for staff, director? No questions? No? Okay. Chair and board members' reports, I guess that's me, agenda item 6. I guess my report is I spoke to former PAB Chair Izzy Ramsey today. And he sends his best regards to us and he thanks us for our continued efforts in accountability, transparency and oversight. So that is a good message for all of us to remember because he was actually, I believe, the chair when the downtown task force report went to council, or at least, or no, was initiated, is that right?
He was the first chair to PAB, I think. He was definitely on the board when it broke out. I
That's
don't
what I
know if he was
meant,
a chair.
that's what I meant.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, sure. Any other board member reports from?
No.
Okay. Quiet guys here today. All right, well, with that. We'll go to agenda item 7, Chief of Police Report. I think Chief Lewis is here with us. Thank you for being here, Chief Lewis.
Yeah, of course. Good evening. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. So since it's already come up a couple times as a topic, I want to cover a couple administrative items. I do know that we Chair Cayetano some responses regarding the MOU compendium. I know there were a couple follow-up questions. Deputy Chief Tate is off this week on vacation, which is why she couldn't be here this evening. But did let me know that she had pulled all together that information, and I anticipate that either today or certainly by the end of the week that the responses to that will be to you, Chair Cayetano. And then she also made herself available if there's follow-up questions to either meet or exchange emails on that topic. This very recently, Vice Chair Wilson and our Strategic Planning and Accountability Manager, Arlo Momberg, met to discuss some of the data points that are available on the Transparency Hub. That was stemmed from a conversation that Chair Cayetano and I had, and also directly related to the upcoming FIP item that's coming to the Public Safety Policy Committee later this month. So I actually just wanted to call that out as a really good example of the communication and collaboration and really understanding that we can get, both understanding from the board's position and director of accountability's position, like what their needs are, what the information needs are, and their whys. And then be able to sit with us and look through the ways that we are able to access and record and understand our data, and then what our limitations are. It really allows us to align our goals and more effectively work together in a collaborative way. So I thought that was a success, and know that a lot of the work that Deputy Chief Tate's been able to do, and a lot of the subcommittee policy work, I think has allowed us to have conversations earlier before policies get launched, and to ensure that we're at least working from a common understanding. And then when we have disagreements, follow our proper channels to resolve those disagreements. But at least we know we're disagreeing about something that we're on the same page about, what the understanding is. I do want to acknowledge that there are other outstanding requests for information or data related to policy and procedural reviews, as well as the normal requests for records that come in for the complaint investigations. As you can imagine, That's a lot for us to work through. Some require us to access older records or manually count things. It also requires us to prioritize that work with the other responsibilities that we have under our existing staffing challenges. I only say that to say that I have a running list. If there's things that you're waiting for answers that you haven't got answers, and you think they have fallen off our radar for some reason, I encourage you to reach back out. I'm going to continue to work through getting the responses over, and working with the director when we have questions or need clarification. But my goal is to continue to work through those requests. I wanted to also give an update. On our early intervention system work, we're continuing to make progress with benchmark analytics on implementation. That's going along according to our timeline. In the meantime, I expect to be providing to the board and the director in the next few weeks our most recent EIS internal quarterly audit. And we're going to continue, as I've shared, we're going to continue to do that work until the EIS platform is operational. Let's see. Not a lot of cases of interest I want to share, but I did want to talk a little bit about an item of interest, and that is some of the protest activity that we've seen recently in our city. Since February 15th of this year, there's been weekly Saturday protests at the Tesla showroom on 4th Street, ranging anywhere from 100 to 300 individuals coming out to primarily peacefully protest in that area. We have had a couple arrests related to either counter protests or vandalism that has occurred during those incidents, but for the most part, they've been extremely peaceful. And we have had law enforcement personnel available if we need to block a street from vehicular traffic or otherwise support those efforts. This last weekend, April 5th, there were actually that planned Tesla event, but then also a larger planned event near the North Berkeley BART station. Again, we had officers available to support that. It ended up growing to the level of approximately 3,000 people that were, for the most part, lining the sidewalk and again, peacefully protesting. What it did require was a lot of coordination, if you can imagine, with our on-duty personnel, patrol, our watch commander, and our parking enforcement officers to ensure that cars were not able to drive through where people were, that people were able to safely express their First Amendment rights. At the same time, handling all the other responsibilities in this that were going on elsewhere in the city. So I just wanted to call that out as one of the important parts of our work, which is to support the free expression of First Amendment rights, to ensure that we help facilitate those events and work with event organizers to make them as safe as possible. So I was pretty proud of the work that got done there and was accomplished with the limited personnel that we had. We have had some hate crimes and vandalism events related to Teslas in general throughout the city, but we continue to monitor and trend the hate crime reporting to try to make sense of what our community is experiencing so that we can direct resources accordingly. Those are the primary things I wanted to cover tonight. Happy to answer any other specific questions as I'm able or get answers where needed.
Thanks, Chief Lewis. I guess I'll open it up first to my fellow board members before asking a couple of my own questions.
I don't have any questions, Chief, but I was at that protest on Saturday and I just wanted to express my appreciation for what a great job the police did do. I saw police cars on the corners, but they were not even out and about. It just seemed like a perfect way of making sure it's safety. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm happy to hear that.
Any questions? Yeah, I just want to say thank you for your efforts to facilitate the protests. I think it's a good example. To the extent that I've heard, I don't have any personal knowledge, but everything that I've seen has been very appreciated and supported. I'm also appreciative for the data sharing that we've been doing and the communication and collaboration on that front. I totally agree with you that we're establishing a good protocol and method for figuring out what is feasible and where we can lighten your administrative burden and also prioritize requests. So I think we might be discussing a way to like a more systematic way to prioritize requests to you. so that to make your job easier, but that's pending. Shoot, there was and I just blanked on what I was gonna ask. Okay, I had so many questions and then they just left my head. Maybe I should go first next time. I'll look forward to that response, from Deputy Chief Tate, on the MOUs. So thank you for that. I wish I had my questions in my head to ask you, but since they're not there anymore, thanks for your time.
Yeah, of course. And, I'm always available via email. And Deputy Chief Tate will be back and happy to answer questions. And you've got Lieutenant Bonaventure there for the rest of the evening. If you've come up with some hard hitting questions, I'm sure he'd appreciate them.
Let me ask one question, sorry, before you leave.
Yeah, of course.
Is the department planning on submitting its annual report by a specific date? Or will it wait for us to provide our recommendations and then submit it to council afterward? Right?
You're talking about, yeah.
Controlled equipment report, that's what I mean.
Oh, I see. If I understand the timing correctly, we have a due date when it's due to go to council and a due date that it's gone to you, to the board. I think we got ahead of schedule, giving it to the PAB. Typically, we like to be able to submit alongside it the PAB's response. I think I just would need to check again about when our reporting period is due. It may not be as strict as the military equipment ordinance is in the summer, but I'm happy to, if we can pause it or at least get it on the calendar and then hold it for your response if your response is going to come in a timely manner.
Okay, well, we can't respond until we hear back on the records we requested, so maybe we can align on that timeline. And then we'll hear back from when your plan submission date is.
Okay.
We can work.
Yeah, I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
check. I can check in and see what our due date is, and then connect with you about what timing might look like.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Appreciate you being
Of course.
here.
Of course. Have a good night.
Okay. Agenda item 8. Wow, I can't believe I blanked on my questions. That was tough. I came back to the most important one, honestly. Subcommittee reports. Let's go through this list. Jose.
All right, thank you, Chair. Again, this is just the time to report for subcommittees to report on activities, meeting schedules for all subcommittees, possible appointments or reassignments, and any additional discussion and action as warranted for the subcommittees listed on the subcommittee list on page 14 of the packet. With that said, I'll start with the regulation subcommittee.
I'll be doing the update tonight. So we've continued with our meetings. The most recent meeting in the labor negotiations around our permanent regulations was an internal meeting of the city stakeholders, which is a pretty big group. It's the police department and the city attorney and the city manager and HR. And am I missing anybody? Anyway, it's a big group, and so it's kind of a challenge because our regulations are so detailed, and so it's very slow because we're getting input from everybody. Our last meeting, we began discussing our subpoena power, and we'll turn to body worn camera complainants access to body worn camera footage, and those are the two, I'd say, most contentious issues in our regulations. And they create a lot of discussion with the internal stakeholders and then, of course, with the union. So we're just turning to those. Anything else? Board Member Calavita, that you want to add?
No, just to confirm that it's a labor intensive process.
Yes. So that's it.
I mean, thank you. Enduring commitment to this.
The other thing, just to note that, so our board approved regulations 2 years ago, right? But through the course of the labor negotiations, they've changed. And so they will have to come back to this body for final approval. If the board does not approve them, or if there's some sections that the board doesn't approve, then it will have to go back through the whole process. So it's hopefully that won't happen, but there's just recognition that the document that the board signed off on 2 years ago is not the same document that we'll end up bringing back.
Thank you. I made this comment that I'm afraid that the meal I ordered won't be the one that I get. So we'll see what happens. when that comes back up to us, but to the extent you're keeping us updated, thank you.
We're working in the kitchen hard to get that.
Okay, next, okay, policy review subcommittee?
You can go ahead and make any update. I don't think there is any, but
My update is that the Berkeley law students are helpfully, working, on supporting us with certain policy reviews that we asked them to support on, specifically, related to traffic safety, and vehicle pursuit reports. So very appreciative of their work there. And I think that we're planning on meeting about body worn camera at some point and also submitting a report to council to supplement our report to the city manager's office. I will say that we need to follow up with the city manager's office because we haven't heard back yet, but that is on me and I will do that.
Thank you, Chair. Metrics and operations,
No update.
okay. Outreach and engagement,
That's me, right?
yeah,
That's me, right? We're gonna have our first meeting this month.
okay.
Yeah, Randy's excited. Board member Wells is excited, sorry, excuse me.
You, and then we could get to the next one. And I'll move on to our liaison list. Starting with Board Member Cayetano, are there any updates?
You heard the update on EIS, we're waiting to hear, like, that process is gonna be ongoing for a few months.
Okay. And Vice Chair Wilson regarding FIP.
Yeah, I want to give an update, but I also want to suggest that the assignment titles, I think, at least for FIP, that it should be revised because it's not the liaison simply to represent the PAB for the report presentation. I think we suggested just a general liaison role with respect to FIP. So I want to clarify that. As the chief mentioned, I met yesterday with Arlo, whose illustrious title I cannot remember, with the department, and we went over the PAB's identified requests for revised reporting from the department with respect to FIP implementation. I think we came out with a good, I'll call it a compromise, that the chair is going to relay formally to the chief. And assuming there's agreement there, then we would bring back to the PAB just an update on kind of the original set of recommendations and the path forward, given what we've agreed to with the department, and all of that would be relayed back to the Public Safety Committee. So I think we're making progress there.
And do you know the date for the public safety committee meeting?
No.
Okay. We'll get that settled too.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to the policy complaints. Board Member Calavita.
Yes, so this is an update on the policy review. You all may remember that a policy was brought to us having to do with the interaction of an officer with a complainant. That's not about the complaint, but just in a course of dispatch that perhaps some policy could be established that would make it so that whenever possible, an individual who has complained about an officer would not encounter that officer when calling the police department. Okay, and so I want to thank Jose, who did, our policy analyst, who did the research on this, and I'm just reporting back. But what was found is that I asked Jose to look at policies of different jurisdictions to see if there was any policy regarding interactions between a subject officer and a complainant outside of the complaint itself. And Jose found no current policy on interactions between subject officers and community members who filed a complaint against them during calls for service. neither our department nor other jurisdictions seem to have any policy related to that. The fear of the person who came forward said that there's fear of retaliation, potential retaliation, or the perception of possible retaliation. And so we looked in to see whether there were any policies relating to that, and none could be found. We also looked at best practices in the field, whether NACOL or any other body like that had any written best policies regarding subject officer interactions with complainants. And we didn't find anything specifically about that. There was very little discussion about that, but there was talk about policies that avoid real or perceived retaliation for filing a complaint. So that's what has been found. And so moving forward, it may be that I or we or could perhaps interact with ask the department whether it is feasible to produce a policy, and Berkeley would be a model in the field, which would state something to the effect of whenever feasible, because it's clear that it might not always be feasible, but that whenever feasible, and there's a call for service that, and the call for service comes from someone who's complained about a particular subject officer, that subject officer would not be the one to be sent.
Can I ask you a question on how would dispatch know?
Those are things we have to look into.
Okay, to me, that seems to be the challenge.
Yeah, it will be challenging, and we'll see if we could arrive at something. Because it does seem like a worthwhile effort to, I can imagine that a person would feel stressed, having filed a complaint against the officer. So, anyway, that's where we are, and I guess, I don't know if I'm asking for permission to move forward on this. Discussion. I see that the agenda allows for discussion on these items and action. So what do people think?
I think it'd be great for you to move forward if you're able to do that.
Are we able to discuss about?
Mhm.
Okay, great.
It says so on the agenda.
Yeah,
so-
great. Let's hope. Just wanted to make sure.
So what are people's reactions?
Sounds like you're doing good work, and that this is an opportunity for us to, you know, be a model, like you said.
Yeah.
And I would be very interested in how it can actually be operationalized,
Right,
which seems like wherever Leftwich pointed out is the issue.
right.
Have you talked to the department at all about whether they'd be interested in this?
No, we have not.
Okay,
First step was to see whether there were other models out there and to think it through, and whether there's any best practices from NACOL or anybody. And so I'd be willing to test the waters in the department.
I just have a procedural question. It was assigned to you.
I sort of volunteered.
Okay, so why do you think we need to vote on it? Is it because it was assigned to,
Well,
or
I
just a
guess,
preliminary review?
I guess it's not that we need to vote, but I wanted some feedback, some discussion.
Okay,
So, okay, so I'll test the waters. It may be, but maybe when the call comes into dispatch, it may not be possible, but it may be that in the process of patrol, it might be a different scenario, you know? So,
I mean, it could be as simple as, putting a duty on an officer to remove themselves from the situation
Right.
once they discover that
If possible.
if two officers arrive on the scene,
or to
you
call
know, one
someone,
might step back, something.
or
Yeah.
if, you know, the person who that they're responding to, you know, makes a statement to that effect, then, you know, it doesn't have to be from dispatch.
Yeah, and we'll see where it might fit, what policy it might fit into, so. test the works.
Director Harrison.
Yeah, I just wanted to, and these procedures generally, but Lieutenant can correct me, but. I don't know if in this context, but there are times when there are CAD notes that are available, like. If an officer is responding to a call for domestic violence, they might ask, is there any history with our department in this call? So the dispatcher would know, potentially. And generally speaking, I don't know, I'm not speaking to our department, I'm just saying that there are, in police practices, there might be that opportunity. I think there's also an opportunity to look at how Able can interact with this. So in the act, if it's not operationally viable to assign a different officer, how does Able play into account when you're dispatching an officer that may have a history with somebody and perhaps they need to be tapped out, so to speak? Hey, remember, maybe you're in a moment where you're not remember the history, but Able has empowered officers to be able to tap out.
Able being a program where one colleague could advise the other colleague.
Correct.
Yeah.
In real time, that, hey, let's switch off kind of thing. So,
Lieutenant, do you have any thoughts about this issue?
Well, like the director Hansel was saying, that we do have candidates. But those are related to crimes that have happened and so forth. So to put personal information in the cabinet would be okay. Especially running the whole issues. So.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's all for our list.
Okay, next item. Agenda item 9, discussion and action items. 9A is discussion and action on new policy complaint 2025 PR 0002. In accordance with section G, policy complaints and reviews of the PAB standing rules.
I'll just start with a brief reminder regarding section G. Under the current standing rules, the complainant would have the opportunity to address the board for 5 minutes. And then a public comment section would follow that comment. We reached out to the complainant, but we were unable to contact them. We tried multiple times since receiving, including today, but we were unable to receive a follow through. So with that context, I'll provide a quick summary of the personnel complaint and my recommendations before we open it up. Policy complaint. Before we open it up to public comment and the board's discussion. So the material is on page 17 of your packets. This policy complaint we received on March 20th, 2025. It expressed concerns with the presence of encampments in West Berkeley and the existing conditions around them. The complaint stated that they specifically wanted to see these encampments removed based on the complaint form that they submitted, but provided no additional information. As part of our preliminary review, we noted that the Berkeley Police Department isn't the first point of contact for this type of complaint or enforcement action, as it relies on the coordination with other city departments, primarily on the homeless response team, which is primarily led by the Neighborhood Services Division in the city, along with other departments that provide support. With that context, we recommend that the board doesn't accept this complaint, but redirect it to the Neighborhood Services Division at this time, just given that, again, the enforcement action is primarily around the Neighborhood Services Division. Before I open it up to board member questions and then public comment, I'll hand it back to the director for any additional comments.
Not at this time.
Okay, board members, questions?
So did this policy complaint address specific issues with police department policies, or it was at a general discontent with the encampments and what was being done?
So on page 21 of 22 of the packet, we have the complaint form.
Yeah,
Regarding that question, the only thing that we received, the only information we received was that they want, quote, have these motor homes removed. When answering, what changes to the policy practice or procedure do you propose? Again, we tried to contact the complainant on various occasions to get additional information and clarification, but we didn't receive a response to the voicemails and emails we sent to the complainant. So at this time, that's the only information we have.
I move we accept the recommendation of the staff.
Second.
Just before I open it, just to double check it, because it is a procedural, to make sure that there isn't any public comment from those physically present, or those attending virtually.
Do we vote and then public comment, or is there public comment then vote?
It's a public comment and then vote.
Okay.
But at this time, there are no hands raised for those physically present or the virtual attendees. And Lieutenant, I'm not sure if there's any additional context like to provide the board on this issue before they vote. Okay, with that, Chair, the board could present its motion.
I think we did present it. Can we do a roll call?
Do we repeat the motion just for?
To accept your recommendation to. Was it close?
Not to accept
Not
this
to accept.
complaint and to
Direct it.
refer it to the Neighborhood Services Division.
And could you remind me of who seconded?
I do.
Vice Chair. Okay, and I'll proceed with a roll call vote. Board Member Calavita,
Yes,
Board Member Leftwich,
Yes,
Board Member Wells,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yes.
and Chair Cayetano.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Okay, with that. We turn to agenda item 9B, discussion action on the PAB's review of the BPD's mutual aid agreements with other law enforcement agencies. Arthur. Director, do you have any context you would like to provide?
Sure, so we just, we heard from the chief tonight that, they are actively going through the active request. We have provided a memo to, summarize the conversation that you, Chair, have been having with the department and DCK. But if there are any other questions beyond that, we can provide more input or information, hopefully.
So I just wanted to make sure that the other board members are aware of what's, I guess, this back and forth is about for context. We were having difficulty tracking down the mutual aid agreements. And we found excerpts to agreements that looked like they were not renewed since 2017. And we also identified that there was an obligation under Berkeley Municipal Code that these be renewed every year. And so we had questions about that. And then we also, I was just like confused in general about what was the nature of this agreement. And from what the department has explained is that, you know, there's been some backlog and that they're working on getting these renewed and soon, like within the next couple of months, which I appreciate. But there's still like open questions about what the status was of those former agreements. And the phrase that I was given was verbal understandings. And I don't know what that means, honestly. And I don't know if a verbal understanding imposed an obligation on BPD such that it was a policy that its officers were expected to follow.
they should not be verbal understanding.
No, they shouldn't be. I agree with that, especially when it concerns mutual aid agreements with departments like ICE, DHS, you know, all these like federal law enforcement agencies that have had an increasing presence in local jurisdictions around the country. So I want to be very clear about what these agreements are and what the source of authority is and what their status is right now. And then I also mentioned to the department that there were two provisions in the excerpts that we received that were concerning to me. The first one I was informed was not applicable anymore because it was moot. Like that language is no longer in effect. But there was the other language that I highlighted at the last meeting or the last time we discussed this, which is that under the current regulations, BPD, or not regulations, excuse me, under the current verbal understanding, BPD is allowed to communicate and reach out and ask for support from ICE and other immigration enforcement agencies, if they suspect that a non-citizen was involved in some crime. And so they can get data, additional data from these federal agencies, in order to serve a law enforcement purpose. Which I think is surprising, considering that I thought that our policy as a city was that we don't cooperate, but there's a zero cooperation policy with these immigration agencies, and that we don't data share with them. It seems to me like this is a data sharing, that we share data by explaining who we're looking out for, that they're a non-citizen within Berkeley, and that we're asking them for we're asking them for additional information. So there hasn't been any attention, at least as long as I've been around, on this provision, and I don't know if it's currently being implemented by the department. So we're trying to get answers from the department on whether this is actually happening in our city. And that's why I'm waiting for, that's the answer that I'm waiting for right now, I guess. And my understanding is that they haven't, but I don't, like, the records are unclear.
I'm just thinking, since we have the chief, but I think this has come up before, where the chief does a report and there's an opportunity for us to ask questions, and then later in our meetings, there are things that are quite relevant that would be worth raising publicly. And this seems to be an example of that.
What questions would you want to ask? Because, I mean, to their credit, open line of communication. Now, it's been like literally 2.5 weeks since I received a response to my last question, or something, 2 weeks. And so I'm still really waiting for it, but I'm happy to convey any questions that you have to them and ask for a response.
I'm just thinking it would be a useful conversation for the public to hear and for us to all have with the chief.
Yeah.
So maybe we could let the chief know that during her update at the next meeting, we'd like to specifically talk about this issue.
Right.
I have another point of concern,
Yeah.
we did receive one updated MOU, it's with the UC
Oh, yes.
Police Department.
Yes.
And I just thought it's interesting, it is characterized, I think, as the 21st Amendment since the original agreement in 1958. And there is no term. So as far as I can tell, so I find that very interesting. And I just wonder, sort of procedurally, is it appropriate to have MOUs for this kind of activity with no term date?
But I thought this, under the city rules, they last for a year. They're supposed to be renewed every year,
I don't know.
right? I mean, that seems contradictory to me.
I mean, that's what the municipal code says. I don't have any answer besides that.
So I think it's just something that really stood out to me. And obviously it has not been done every year. That's been established. I don't know that every year that might be an onerous workload for the department, but certainly there should be some standardized process.
And they should change, if the municipal code says it's annual, then they need to change that and say not, every 5 years for the police department or whatever.
I mean, I agree. Annual seems like a lot. But having no visibility into, we didn't publish the MOU with the University of California in the agenda, right?
No.
No.
Okay. But
So it's publicly available on the university's website.
oh, it is.
Mhm.
Okay. Good to know.
So Chair, so which of the MOUs are verbal agreements? Are you just referring to the ones with ICE?
Yeah, so there's US ICE, US Customs and Border Protection,
It's just those that were.
and then there was the US, another ICE one that was rescinded in 2018.
Okay. So is there a separate statement about Berkeley being a sanctuary city? Separate from the MOU, from this verbal agreement?
Is, whose statement?
Is there a separate document establishing Berkeley as a sanctuary city?
There was a resolution, I believe, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, there's a resolution.
Either of them?
There's no municipal, it's not codified.
Uh-huh.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's not codified, and speaking from my position on the Sanctuary City Task Force, the Mayor Sanctuary City Task Force, it seems like there is some of the council members might put that on the agenda in the next couple of months,
Okay,
so.
and as part of that, how do we suggest that this verbal agreement also be open to discussion? Because it seems that it contradicts this sanctuary resolution.
So I think I would invite anyone who is interested in this to send me or like to make themselves available, because I have open lines of communication with the subcommittee group that is working on this, on the ordinance. And I have told them about these provisions. And so we're working on strengthening the provisions that currently exist and also, and then sort of like we're scrutinizing these MOUs as part of that process. And I mean, like, honestly, like, I think that it's a worthwhile thing for us to do, especially in this moment.
Yeah,
Could we, ask the city attorney, about this discrepancy or some interpretation of the municipal code that says the MOUs need to be renewed annually? Based on the fact that it seems like that's not happening at all, just inquiry the city attorney. And I also had a thought, maybe the minutes could reflect the requests, so that, I know you were saying staff goes back over the minutes, but if the requests are in the minutes, then it would be easier,
that's a good idea.
to keep track.
I would just say, I believe that we decided to do this limited MOU review pursuant to our current standing rules. And I think, I'm not sure we need to ask the city attorney anything personally. I think perhaps as part of the review that we complete, we could recommend a different cycle. I'm fine with asking city attorney, but I think it might be more productive for us and the department to recommend a revision to the cycle. Ultimately, that's just what I.
Yeah, I guess I would just like some confirmation that it isn't happening, that there's no compliance with the.
They've told us,
They've told us that.
yeah, they're not getting updated every year. They're in the process of updating them now. I believe they said they updated them in 2018, I think.
Yeah.
Is what they said, so that's. been
But
discussed.
maybe also the city attorney could weigh in on this concept of verbal
Right.
agreements to an MOU.
Right.
I mean, yeah, they should, one of the outstanding questions that I had was there an obligation imposed by these agreements? And I'm guessing that the reason things are taking so long is they have to figure out that answer with the city attorney.
Well, maybe as the vice chair recommended, we could agendize this for a discussion and have the chief speak to us on this. So it's more public and she can answer our questions, because it seems like we have lots of
I
questions.
have lots of questions. I will invite her to do so. I would ask that, at the end of this process, if the board makes a formal recommendation that I can deliver to the mayor's working group based on our review of this. So that's sort of like where I'm getting at with all this process, is that, once we identify specific things, I want to be able to bring it to them, so that it actually gets somewhere. But I will invite her. I mean,
And what's your timeline on that?
yeah, so the mid-May, or like the end of May.
Okay.
So we have a couple meetings where one of which hopefully the chief can come and explain, or Deputy Chief Tate, who's been sort of like doing this point analysis. And then the meeting after that where we can vote on a recommendation, if that works.
And have you been to those meetings, the working group? Because not to be alarmist, but what's happening nationally is that the administration is threatening to withhold any funding from states and municipalities who don't cooperate. So the question then becomes, what's the city plan to do?
Yeah,
I mean, this may be moot, this discussion.
yeah,
I guess I would just say it's, we're in an interesting role. We are an oversight body, but in that capacity, I think we need to be pragmatic. And one of the things that I'm observing in our interactions with the department and multiple areas, be it policy review, be it this MOU review, be it the conversations around data, is that there's a very small number of people that any one of us is interacting with. And the demands are quite significant. And I know as part of the last budget cycle for the department, there was a request to increase administrative and kind of policy staffing. I'm not sure, and we did support that. And I'm not sure what actually happened with that on the department side. But I do think that their capacity is a legitimate issue. So when you look at the number of MOUs that they do have, a requirement to update them annually, compounded by all of these other requirements and requests, that we do need to take that into account and try to be an ally perhaps in supporting them and getting additional resources for this kind of work that I think increasingly the public and others expect, which is not like traditional boots on the ground police. It's other kinds of staffing. So just want to make that comment.
But presumably the municipal code applies to all MOUs in the city, right? It's not just the police
And
department.
they may all be out of compliance,
Right.
we know. Yeah. An annual update requirement is pretty onerous.
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you're on the budget committee, so you're welcome to bring that recommendation or pitch that recommendation on.
Yeah, no, I don't have, I just wanted to make that comment, and again, I don't know what happened in the last budget cycle.
Yeah. Okay, well, it looks like there's no action on this. Just gotta reiterate that I don't think that there should be any verbal understandings governing anything BPD related that, like, that doesn't make any sense to me. It does not conducive to transparency or accountability. And especially in this area where, people's lives are literally in the balance, so.
So the action item, you're gonna still invite the chief to come
I'm gonna invite her,
speak to us on this issue,
I'm gonna invite her, and she probably will send Deputy Chief Tate, because Deputy Chief Tate is the one who's been doing the 25 million. But, so be it. Okay, anything else? From anyone else? Okay. Okay, 9C, discussion and action on the PAB's proposed response to the BPD's 2024 annual report. Director.
The pursuant to the last meeting, conversation, where the body reviewed the annual report. We summarized the deliberations, conversations into a memo. And we try to be as accurate as possible, so we provided to you here. Board member Lethbridge noted that the date said April 4th, that was just the date when we finalized it internally. We have not shared this with the department, so this is this draft format. We tried to, again, mirror the conversation that you had here, and what we call the recommendations. But all it is fair game, for whatever final format you decide to select.
Well, what I was thinking is that it might be helpful to have this go to the chief and to perhaps have an agenda item where we discuss this with her, or subcommittee discusses this with her, rather than it go in this form to the mayor, the city council, and city manager. I think it'd be nice to get the department's response to some of these recommendations.
It is work to the department. We drafted it because in the way that we envisioned, but we don't, again, everything is fair game here to be mindful. It hasn't gone to anybody, other than the public agenda. I would agree that you go to the department and not CC yet, the other people here. I think the recommendations I think are excellent. On the number one, use of force reporting. You know, there may be, or I guess I'm asking the question. Can there be something between not reporting at all on level one use of force and having to go through all the different levels of reporting that the lieutenant described to us last time? Because I agree that that seems like more work than necessary, but we could have transparency without all of those different layers of reporting that were described. For level one.
I'm also wondering about the protocol. Chair, I thought we sent that. I thought I know you had drafted a protocol. Did that article go to the chair?
I know I told them to put it on to deprioritize that compared to the other requests that we've had so far.
Oh,
So it's there in the balance, or like it's there on the agenda. It's just like number 6 or 7. But I do think that this report, including the protocol and, you know, the mutual aid stuff, it can all happen in a meeting, and also that FIP where it can all happen in a meeting with me and the chief. And in a sense, like I can talk to the other departments, you know, to take on a lot of this stuff, try to work out some of these, if that's the way we want to go.
I mean, I like the idea of having it all on paper, sent to the chief.
I'm gonna discuss.
And then discussing it. And whether that's you discussing that, but I think we should invite their response to these recommendations and note that when it comes to the protocol, that, you know, we have proposed a protocol.
Yeah, we have.
So that doesn't, I don't think that's reflected in here.
It is, it's there. It's put there to.
Oh, develop guidelines. Okay.
Yeah.
On the use of force, I like the idea, the recommendation of identifying alternative tracking methods. I don't know that we need a comprehensive impact analysis, or, you know, that might be a lot of work for someone that might not be necessary, but I think that we could uphold transparency by having an alternative tracking method, just so we know, okay, how many times did this happen? How many times did that happen, rather than having to. The lieutenant was saying that somebody has to look at the body worn camera footage and et cetera, et cetera. All that might be more than is necessary for level one. I don't know, people. Agree.
I think I somehow missed it at the last meeting when this was discussed, because I did not think that we were going to send forward any recommendations regarding the annual report. So then I was surprised to see this, which I acknowledge maybe I shouldn't have been. I do think in light of the conversations, you know, I recently had, and I know our chair has had as well, with the department about requests for reporting. I'm just thinking about consolidating requests. Might we be more effective if we had one comprehensive request that included everything we want to see? I'm also informed by the fact that this kind of compromise that I worked out yesterday with Arlo does involve incorporating FIP reporting into the annual report. And so I didn't review this item with that in mind, and I just want to make sure that it aligns with what we discussed yesterday. So these are particularly helpful comments. I think I would appreciate holding off on sending this until at least I can do that part to make sure it aligns with, you know, what we just discussed yesterday, but otherwise.
Well, I also think some of these things, rather than, so like we have, you know, number 5, recognition of PAB oversight role. I think I might have mentioned this, that we weren't, that report doesn't even mention us. But I don't know so much if it's a recommendation as much as, you know, I might phrase this more, our observations. You know, our observations about our input regarding the annual report. Rather than all of these things necessarily being recommendation. You know, I mean, it's just maybe a little bit different tone, but.
I kind of like the recommendations. I feel like. I thought the structure of the report was very clear, like, here's a topic and here's a particular recommendation.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is my personal recommendation that they include. No, that they mention us and that
Yeah.
they include the number of complaints that have been made
Yeah,
and that they track that. I mean, like, so, I mean, to me, it's a recommendation, but happy to hear other opinions. But also, like, I agree with Vice Chair Wilson about aligning on the data requests. I think that if we can do that, it would be helpful. So maybe we should table
Yeah,
until
so
Vice
that's
Chair
just a
Wilson
little-
can do that.
premature.
I think the value in this exercise, and I noted it in real time on the police department. The city council also had some observations and light recommendations. So systematizing this might be
Yeah.
helpful, whether it's here or whatever, but, because sometimes, you know, it doesn't get documented formally, so then they come next and be like, didn't we tell you last year to do this? And
Yeah.
So.
That's true.
Yeah, no,
But what these would also, when did, beginning the timing of when we got the report, did we have any inputs? What was a done deal when we got it? I'm just wondering
If we just get it ahead of the presentation, there was no, you didn't line up with the council's meeting, but you got it ahead of time, but it already represented.
so this is definitely next year.
Right.
so we're not under any kind of deadline, we can pull it off in this while, board member Wilson also. Checks to see the alignment with discussions with Arlo. And I really appreciate the format here, and it seemed to me in reading it that, you would take to heart our idea that we would like succinctness, I really liked how.
Yeah.
Very clear, and here's the recommendation, and I like the format.
Just telling you, our data analyst, I usually took the first, run at this, so be very meticulous.
Good job.
I also agree with not, copying council and city manager until we've been able to hear back, so. Okay. Any additional final comment? It sounds like we're not gonna take any action on this. All right. With that, we'll move forward to the next item, which is public comment.
Thank you, Chair. As a reminder, speakers are generally allowed up to 3 minutes, and there may be a lot of less time to start being speakers. They may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at the time, except confidential personal matters. With that said, for any of our physically present speakers would like to provide public comment. Okay, seeing or hearing none, I'll move on to our virtual attendees. If you're attending virtually and would like to provide public comment, please use the raise hand icon. Or star 9 if you're calling in. Chair, at this time, we don't have any hands raised.
Okay,
Unprecedented.
this will be the quickest PAB meeting ever. You know why? It's because we're all doing the work and reporting on it. That's what I like to say. Okay, agenda 11, closed session.
The webinar will remain active. The audio and video would be stopped. We'll be returning back for a closed session action.
We are
Thank you.
doing.
I want to apologize to you for having ignored a lot of the correct information.
We're live.
The board, affirmed a couple administrative closures and also rejected one. And with that, that brings us to the end of the closed session. Huh? Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Sorry.